Okay. I'll give a quick explanation about social work. So this is one position within the behavioral health field, and there's different levels of social work. So there's the bachelor level, like you were saying, working with homeless population or working with like substance abuse, child protection, issues like that, case management. And then there's the master's level, which gets a little more into the clinical side of assessment and treatment of mental disorders. And then the clinical side is where you're really able to, make those assessments and diagnose people. And diagnosis is usually what drives the treatment. So within the behavioral health field, social work, clinical social work is one aspect of usually a triad with the psychiatrist, who's the prescriber at the top. And then social work and psychology, typically in any organization you're in, they're going to put psychology right under psychiatry because their credentials are similar. They have to have a doctorate degree to practice that. And then for clinical social work, it's just under that. We have a master's degree and 2 to 3 years of supervised training to get that independent clinical license. So that's kind of a broad overview. So again, the main role for a clinical social worker is in the assessment and diagnosis and treatment of mental disorders. So for me personally, I was doing that in the Army. I got my master's degree before I started my active duty time, and then I completed a 2-year internship in the Army. So I was practicing under supervision of a licensed professional, and then I was actually doing all the work pretty independently, but you meet with that person once a week for supervision with my, my supervisor. So then the bulk of my work within the Army was actually doing psychotherapy, mostly because of the need. My position within our brigade was to consult with commanders, provide trainings and teachings about, behavioral health and risk factors and how to manage the issues within the units. But because there was such a great need, most of my time was spent doing psychotherapy. Okay, so that's my intro to social work. I'm going to just do a quick Jai Radhamadhava and some prayers, and then I'll talk about what this presentation is going to be about, what you can expect, and then I'll get right into the slideshow. Jai Radhamadhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Om Jnana-timirandasya Dhyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakam Vitam Sa Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna. First of all, thank you Ramananda for inviting me to give a class. Thank you also for facilitating these classes for us every day. At first, when Ramananda asked me to give a class, I said, no way. I mean, no thank you. Because I honestly feel like I'm probably the least qualified person to be giving a class here on the Sangha. But after listening in for years and contributing nearly nothing, I really felt that I owed it to him. Plus, he asked me some really interesting questions that got me thinking about, why people do the things they do. Why do we do the things we do, particularly the unhelpful and troublesome things? And also, how can we work towards a more cohesive ISKCON, a more cooperative society within our ISKCON? So that's what I'll attempt to address today in this seminar. It's a pretty broad overview of a lot of information. It's all very, interrelated, but there's so much to this that I could really just kind of skim the surface. So I've used the slides to, help with the visual, but also to keep me kind of focused and on track, because there's really a lot that could go into this. So it'll probably get you thinking and hopefully spark some discussion. Okay, so a little bit about what this is actually. Knowing that we're all social beings and interconnected and interdependent on one another in so many ways, it's to our benefit to understand each other and work together to improve our connections and relationships with one another. Also, being embodied, we must acknowledge that our bodies and what happens to us play a major role in the way that we see ourselves, and the way that we see the world, and the way that we see our place in the world. If we could be free from the false ego, free from, the body, and if we could reach transcendence somehow, we wouldn't be experiencing so many of the miseries that are available to us here in the material world. But we're not there yet. We're still here. So we have to acknowledge the position that we're in. We're embodied, we're apt to come under the influence of material nature, we're prone to be an illusion. But also, as aspiring devotees, we're so very, very fortunate that we have been given this knowledge to get out of the awkward position, out of the material world, and to stop suffering altogether. But we need each other to do it. Okay, so with all of your blessings, I'll begin the slideshow now. This is just our title slide, Social Dynamics in the Spiritual Community. Okay, here's kind of a roadmap of what we're going to be discussing. It's broken up here into the 3 sections, starting off looking at the suffering position, Shastra's explanation, also some manifestations and outcomes of suffering. The second section is psychology's explanation of suffering, and we'll be looking at 3 of the major current theoretical frameworks that kind of guide assessment and treatment. And those are attachment theory, interpersonal neurobiology, and trauma theory. And then the third section is a spiritual solution, what Prabhupada has given us. Basically how within our society and within the framework that we've been given by Prabhupada, we have the power to not only understand, why we're suffering, what we're doing here, but how can we decrease that suffering, and how do we stop it and get out of here? And then we'll look at ISKCON as that place that kind of holds all of those potential avenues for healing and for compassion and for connection and relationship. Okay, so starting out, we're looking at suffering from the Shastric view. And we know as devotees that it's normal to be suffering within the material world. It's kind of like what's supposed to be going on here. And there's a reason for it, and it can be helpful for us. So we've got, Mrityu Loka. We know everything here is going to die eventually. It's called the planet of death. We've got the threefold miseries, plus birth, old age, disease, death. Misidentification with the body causes a lot of problems. within the mind, and then karma also. And then here is a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is 5:11:16. The soul's designation, the mind, is the cause of all tribulations in the material world. As long as this fact is unknown to the conditioned living entity, he has to accept the miserable condition of the material body and wander within this universe in different positions. Because the mind is affected by disease, lamentation, illusion, attachment, greed, and enmity, it creates bondage and a false sense of intimacy within this material world. Pretty powerful. Here's another one. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this is Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-8. So what I'm interested in here is in the purport. I'll read the verse just in case people aren't looking at the slides. It says, "My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim." So basically what this purport is saying is that a devotee, once he has surrendered to the Lord, he may still experience some, uncomfortability in the material world. And it may seem like these are reactions to his karma, like, finishing off, you turn off the fan, there's still a little bit of movement there. But really, if a devotee is still maintaining some desires or some sinful mentality, Krishna is so merciful. He gives a reaction in such a way, or might even grant that desire in such a way that you no longer have that. Like, it kind of purifies that desire. So we can see that whatever happens to us, even if it seems terrible at the time, it's Krishna's mercy. Once you surrender to Krishna, whatever happens to you, you should take it as Krishna's blessing. Okay, looking at some outcomes of suffering. So sometimes people go through a terrible, traumatic, horrible situation. They can actually come out better on the other side. We see a lot of people that actually grow through these kind of things. This is called post-traumatic growth. So when you're able to overcome that situation and you come out on the other side with like a renewed hope, renewed strength and vigor. Also, sometimes people in a suffering position, they get so fed up with it, they start searching for something more. They know, like, there's got to be something better out there. So that's what drives a search for meaning. It also spurs creativity and striving. Also, the same kind of feeling, like a person, it's just they can no longer tolerate the status quo where they've been. So they have to break out of that. And many times, for a person to make advancement, like if they're not doing it on their own, you can see somehow or other, they may sometimes manifest a situation in their life that forces them to step outside of their comfortable area, and they actually pushes them into some suffering, but they can actually grow from that. And then surrender can also happen. Many people, you get to a point you can't take it anymore, and then you give up. And this is where you see a lot of people come to spiritual life in this way. They just can't do anything else, and they can't figure out anything else. And so finally they put their hands up and they surrender. More common is we see some problematic reactions to suffering. So this can be a whole range of behaviors, depending on the person that's coming from. And usually these are things that are, it could be, this is the gossiping, or the backbiting, or putting others down, or the list goes on. I'm sure you can think of a few. So the important thing to remember with this is when you see these sort of behaviors coming at you from another person, don't take it personal. Don't assume that it's something that you've done or because of, you know, who you are or whatever, that they're acting that way. If somebody is acting out, that's their behavior, that's their issue. You know, of course you can see, did I have a part in this? But typically not. Typically it's a person's own inability to deal with whatever they're dealing with. So these next couple of slides are some different perspectives, different ways we can see people that might be a more helpful way, rather than just seeing them as these troublesome behaviors or whatever problem they're giving you. So the first one here is the whole person perspective. This is taking into account all aspects of a person. Where they came from, what did they believe, how were they raised, what do they believe about themselves, and also just the, you know, day-to-day aspects of a person. What are their relationships like, how is their health, how's their family. Seeing the person also as part parcel of Krishna, and seeing Krishna within the heart of everyone. Seeing a person as more than their problems or behaviors. Like sometimes if you have a conflict with someone, a terrible thing may have happened years ago, and then now when you think of them, all you think about is what they did, or they're like this. But no, that's just one facet of the person, one facet of the relationship. So having a whole person perspective actually encourages compassion and an expanded worldview. The next perspective is the patient perspective. So as a clinician, this is pretty easy to do. But also, you know, whenever you're dealing with people, if you notice these harsh behaviors or hurtful, harmful, especially things coming out of a person, see that person as they're in pain. They're struggling with something. They're not able to manage, you know, their own internal world, whatever's going on with them. They can't handle it. They're not dealing with it well. And they don't have the resources to say, I need help. I'm not dealing well with this. They may not even know why they're feeling so terrible. And they may not even, you know, want to have terrible interactions or relationships with people. Most people want peace, they want healthy relationships, but they're struggling, they're suffering. So seeing people as patients is a helpful way to be more compassionate, I think, and understanding and tolerant. One point here is that a lot of times the people who hurt you the most are the ones you love the most, you know, within your family or close friends. And that's because those people, you're the closest to them, for one, but also they may feel like, I can treat you like this because I know you're not going to go away. Like, you have to be here. You're my family. You can't leave me. They might, you know, be nicer to strangers. So just keep that in mind when somebody's barking at you. Okay, so let's take a look at psychology's explanation of suffering. They do, you know, acknowledge that there is a connection between the body and the mind. So that's good. They're moving in the right direction there. There's tons and tons of different things that could go wrong with the mind. There's the whole Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is hundreds of disorders, basically, you know, from depression, anxiety, personality disorders, sleep disorders, sexual disorders, obsessive disorders. The common denominator with most of these is that these obviously cause stress for a person, so that, you know, impacts the physical health as well. But what they have found is that most suffering can be traced back to either one or more traumatic or disturbing events in the person's life. I'm not going to go over all this right here. But one of the most important things in determining a person's overall health and well-being is the presence of social supports. So if a person doesn't have that, then their outcomes are going to be much worse most of the time. And so within an unsupportive environment, this is really having lack of friends and family or people who know you and care about you and can help you in a time of need. The poor outcomes that are generally associated with this: higher rates of incarceration, institutionalization, over-medication, addiction, suicidality. So what happens when people have no support, they generally get left to either no help at all, no support, or they're left within the system that may be set up by the government, you know, Medicaid, Medicare, whatever, which is going to be, you can get some resources that way, but it's unlikely that you'll be successful in recovering from a serious mental illness or social problems if you don't have that support, even up to the point of, you know, your physical health deteriorating and shortened lifespan. And it's not just the lack of physical resources, but the emotional support is what's important there. Having people that know you and care about you and are interested in your well-being. Supportive environment, on the other hand, you have all of these people are present there in your life. It may be only one or two even, but if somebody can see you and actually, you know, care for you and has the means and the ability to do that, that can make a huge difference. Positive outcomes associated with having a supportive environment: one is that the crisis may evolve into greater understanding and growth, like we were saying, the post-traumatic growth. And then also those relationships are strengthened with the people who are there for you. When you go through difficult times together and help each other out, those bonds really become much stronger. Having a presence of professional supports like a therapist, social worker, that can be helpful, but it's not the same as a family or friend relationship. There's just certain boundaries that are in place in the professional world that are not there in a friendship or a family member relationship. Also, the person who needs the support, they have to be willing to accept that, which is an obstacle for a lot of people. So even if the supports are present, the person has to be, you know, receiving. Okay, here's these theoretical frameworks. There's many, many theories out there that guide treatment and guide assessment. These are the most popular ones at this time, and they kind of encompass more than most theories. So this first one, attachment theory, this was kind of claimed by John Bowlby. This guy's very famous in the field of behavioral health. So this attachment theory basically says that having a healthy attachment figure, which is usually a parent, in infancy and childhood is the most important factor leading to healthy adulthood. So even just having one healthy relationship, even if it's a grandparent or whatever it is, somebody in your life as a child that is looking out for you, caring for you, and loving you, providing a safe and predictable environment, a stable environment. And when a child's needs are consistently met by this primary caregiver, that creates a secure attachment. And you can see differences in the child depending on how they were raised, how this primary relationship works. So with a secure, healthy attachment, the child will demonstrate confidence and happiness and can be easily soothed. Also, the important thing with this theory is that first relationship actually kind of acts as the prototype for all future relationships. So if that went well, typically the person can have a much easier time in life building relationships, getting along with other people. If that is disrupted, it causes significant problems. By consistently and effectively responding to a child's needs, the neural pathways related to safety and trust are created. So we're going to talk more about the neural pathways. A little bit more about attachment. Okay, so the child's attachment relationship with their primary caregiver leads to the development of an internal working model. So this specifically is talking about, you know, as the child is growing, based on however things went with this attachment figure, how do they see themselves? Let me just kind of illustrate this a little. Say, for instance, a child is crying. Babies cry, children cry because they need something, whether it's attention, affection, food, a clean diaper. So the child is crying. This is their one means of communication, well, basically. And if that is met with acceptance and love and nurturing, then the child feels effective because, oh, I communicate my needs in this way, my needs are met. So what I do matters, basically, is what they get out of that. They also can see if that caregiver responds appropriately, that they can trust someone. They're actually learning how to trust at that young age. And so if they have this security and safety within that, the brain starts using those neural pathways as early as, you know, a tiny baby. And so they start feeling safety, trust, you know, happiness, peace. Okay, so this slide, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a pretty famous slide, famous idea within the behavioral health field. This says that you have to meet the basic physiological and safety needs of a person before they can make progress on this path. So after safety needs are met, becomes the need for love and belongingness, receiving and giving love, affection, trust, and acceptance, feeling like you're part of a group or a family. Once you have that, you can make a step forward with the esteem needs, having a sense of competence, feeling a sense of self-respect. And then it moves on to cognitive needs, and then aesthetic needs, and at the very top is self-actualization, self-realization. So this top part is really, you know, what most people are working towards, especially devotees. But you see, in reality, not everybody gets there in this life. Not everybody has all these needs met. But this is, you know, from a psychology point of view, you have to address these issues first before you can really, you know, get further with, you know, talking about loving and bonding and having a sense of purpose. Okay, so interpersonal neurobiology, this is a fascinating field, and it's very deep, so I'm really just skimming the surface here. But this theory says that human development and functioning are a product of a relationship between the body, the mind, and other relationships. So this really puts a lot of stock in people being connected to other people and needing other people to navigate through life. So another term for this is relational neuroscience. And this is also heavily rooted in the attachment theory. Some everyday examples of this. So like when you see a person yawning, for example, you know where that's going. You see a person open their mouth, maybe lean back, stretch a little, their hand comes up, they're going to yawn. So just by seeing that, you know what's about to happen. You can yawn yourself. Like it could just overcome you. Because when you see somebody else experiencing something that you know what that is, you can make sense of that, you see where it's going, your brain actually starts to create those same firings and the same neural paths to experience the same thing that that person is experiencing. So just imagine how powerful this can be if we are conscious of it and we use it in a helpful, nice, and loving way. Another example is oxytocin, the love hormone. So when, for instance, like when a child is nursing, the body of the child and of the mother, just through this nursing, like the baby is sucking, the milk is coming, that spurs the creation of oxytocin, the love hormone, within the mother and the child. So just by, latching the child onto the breast, the child looks up, the mother looks down at the baby, these love hormones are flowing, they're connected. It seems like just a simple, you're feeding the baby, but no, there's so many other things going on. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, attunement. This is another important aspect of the interpersonal neurobiology. So this is when we really have a chance to connect with another person and how powerful that can be. So this Dan Siegel, he's kind of like, he's the one that coined this interpersonal neurobiology theory. And he's written several books about it. He's a genius, basically. Here's what he says about it. It is crucial to our development that we have at least some relationships that are attuned, in which we feel we are held within another person's internal world, in their head and in their heart, relationships that help us thrive and give us resilience. And also, the neural networks around the heart and around the body are intimately interwoven with the resonance circuits in the brain, so that when we feel felt by another, it also helps us to develop internal strength of self-regulation, to become focused, thoughtful, and resourceful. So just see, by connecting with another person where you really feel safe and seen and felt and heard and like held within that person's internal world, the brain is so connected with the body and all these different circuits. Like, so when you resonate with somebody, that circuit is connected to everything else within your body. So you actually, like this is saying, you can develop strength of self-regulation, becoming focused, thoughtful, and resourceful. There's the practical ways we can tune into other people. Meet them where they are. So physically, emotionally, psychologically. A lot of times when we have a conversation with somebody, we already have, where are we coming from? What are we thinking? What are we feeling? A lot of times forming your response to somebody as they're speaking to you, that's not helpful. When somebody is really trying to talk with you, connect with you, you have to try to feel where they're coming from. Understand, how are they thinking? How are they feeling? If you know a little bit about them, like, what do they believe? What are their experiences? And just by, a person, if they're struggling or unhappy, just by sharing that with somebody, even if it's terrible news, if it's like an ugly conversation, by that person understanding and hearing them, they could feel better. And also that strengthens the relationship between the two, the speaker and the listener. Then I have a quote here by Brené Brown. She's another social worker who's written a couple of really nice books. She says, connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Slides are a little slow to move. Okay. So when attachment gets disrupted, if the person doesn't have that safe, predictable, reliable relationship, like if the parents are absent, incarcerated, abusive, substance dependent, this can lead to all kinds of negative impacts. Higher incidence of impairment in cognitive functioning, impairment in areas of self-control, developmental delays, juvenile delinquency, emotional difficulties, and antisocial behavior. So antisocial behavior, basically that means it's hard for them to get along in society. They don't maintain relationships well. They don't get along. In severe cases, it actually can lead to death if a child is neglected, and that's called what's a failure to thrive. The body just basically starts shutting down and they can die. There are some cultural and societal barriers to attachment within our ISKCON society and also within the larger society. So one of the things that I think has been not so helpful within ISKCON is that we kind of have this derogatory designation for the word attachment. And so when we're talking about material attachments, yeah, we don't want to have those. Those are, stumbling blocks on the material path. But when we talk about emotional attachment and bonding with people, we very much need that to be healthy, especially starting from, early on in life, like we were discussing. So we have to make this distinction about, what's a material and what's a spiritual attachment. And in the past, I've heard some stories. I wasn't around, obviously, in the early days in ISKCON, but in just having a child myself in the last few years, I talked to some other devotees and heard some stories about, some women early on, as they had children, felt that, these children are attachments. We have to get rid of these attachments. And so they would basically not give them the love and care and attention that they deserved, that they needed, or even send them off to someone else to deal with. But no, that's not the way we should see, especially our children, our loved ones, our family. We should see that Krishna put us together for a reason. He loves us all, cares for us deeply, and we should use these relationships to help each other get closer to Krishna. Some barriers within the larger society. So there's medical advice out there now. Like just 3 years ago, I had my daughter in a hospital, and they told me, when you take her home, they gave me a pamphlet even. It was called ABC. She needs to be sleeping alone on her back in a crib. And I just gave them the north-south and said, okay, took the pamphlets home and learned how to survive basically by just keeping her very close to me all the time. That first couple of months after the child is born, they actually call that the fourth trimester. So the child, up until that point, they don't know anything other than being with the mother. They don't know where the mother starts and they end, So they have no survival chance without the mother. I just did what was natural to me, which was keeping her with me all the time, nursing her whenever she was fussy. And she was happy to be snuggled up against me all the time. But what they're saying, because they're worried about sudden infant death syndrome, or maybe the mother's going to roll over on the baby, they say, just make them sleep alone on the back in a crib, which I think most parents would know that's probably never going to happen, especially with a brand new infant. Also, sleep training and timeouts and other parenting tactics that are usually meant to bring more peace to the parent, make that parent feel like they still have a life, they still get to go to sleep at night and wake up. No, that doesn't happen when you have a newborn. So one of the really controversial sleep training methods is called Cry It Out. It's pretty popular, actually. It started around probably, who knows when it really started, but they coined the term in 1913. And what this is the person who's trying to sleep train their child, they leave them in the crib by themselves, let the child cry for longer and longer periods of time before you go in and settle them. And the idea is that the child will learn to settle and soothe themselves. This can take months sometimes, with crying up to 4 or 5 hours a day. which is excruciating usually for the parent and for the child. And this is something that's been passed down from generation. Like, people were trying to tell me to do this. Oh, you know, they're going to cry. You just have to get used to that. It's good for their lungs to have a good cry. Meanwhile, these signals are being sent out from the child, help me, hold me. And the mother is hearing this. The natural instinct is to go scoop up the baby, comfort the baby, love the baby. But no, this is saying ignore all those feelings and let the baby cry it out. So sometimes what happens, if you wait long enough, the baby stops crying. But it's not because they have learned to self-soothe. It's because they gave up. So when a child, a tiny baby, is crying out for safety, for love, for food, for comfort, and they stop, they basically have just come to the conclusion that I can't trust anybody to come for me, and my cries are getting me nothing. So as sad as that is, there's also the physical dangers of that. A child is so vulnerable to stress. Their brain is still forming in those first years of life. And so all of the mechanisms are going into place that teach the child how to deal with emotions. And if they're bombarded with this stress every day, where it's not, you know, soothed, it's not comforted, that stress hormone builds up in the body, it becomes toxic, and it can result in elevated blood pressure, cerebral pressure, erratic fluctuations of the heart, fluctuations in breathing, temperature, suppressed immune system and digestive systems, suppressed growth hormones. This can cause all kinds of problems for this poor child. It's very toxic. Okay, and this is, I mean, I just bring up this one thing. It seems like such a small thing, this cry it out, but people don't realize what's happening within the body and the brain and the mind of that little person when they're being left there. Okay, so let's look at trauma. The definition of this is, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, being exposed to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways. So directly experiencing it, witnessing in another person, as it occurred to others, learning about it from a close family member or friend. One thing to know about trauma is that it actually physically changes your brain. If you look at the scan of a person who has never been traumatized, a brain scan picture, versus a picture who has been through a traumatic event, still suffering from that, the brain looks totally different. It fires in different areas. Some places are practically shut down. It literally changes the brain. Usually, for it to be called a disorder, there has to be functioning impairment in personal, occupational, and social areas. And mostly, it negatively affects a person in the areas of safety and trust. So when a person has been through a traumatic or life-threatening event, their safety danger mechanism, the fight-flight mechanism in the brain, is basically on a hair trigger now. So they're always looking out for possible danger, whether they realize it or not. They're what we call hypervigilant, like they're always looking for the next danger. It also changes the way that you see the world. Like it's a much more negative and scary place to be for people who have experienced trauma and haven't recovered from it. Okay, so I mentioned this before. Most mental disorders can be traced back to some negative event or series of events, whether they were perceived as traumatic at the time or not. Sometimes when you're going through it, you're just living through it. And then when you look back, you go, oh my God, that was terrible. So it doesn't matter so much what it was like when you were living through it. And depending on the person, their demeanor, their countenance, their background, their support. People internalize these things in different ways. And I would add that the influence of the modes of nature also can have an effect on how they deal with it, just because of their own, mentality. And then again, the disorder is not present just because they went through this event, but how did it affect them? Is it negatively impacting their life now, especially in relationships and work and things like that? Okay, generally, people with a trauma history have a hard time relating to others because of that inability to trust. So a lot of times, that safety danger mechanism makes them just draw a conclusion that people can't be trusted, so they don't really even get into it. A lot of times they'll just avoid relationships or avoid, serious conversations or deep connections with people because they don't want to get hurt. ACEs, Adverse Child Experience. This was another study that was done that looks at children who have gone through these difficult situations. If you have a history of these things in your life, this is associated with much more negative outcomes. So the categories here are, being exposed to physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing domestic violence, if one or more of your parents had a substance abuse problem, mental illness in the family, suicide or death in the family, or if somebody in your family was incarcerated. These factors, the more you have of them, the more likely you're going to have negative outcomes. So from the adverse childhood experiences, it disrupts the neurodevelopment, social development, cognitive development, even physical development can be disrupted, which impacts social and emotional and cognitive impairment. The person is more likely to adopt high-risk behaviors, more likely to see disease and disability and social problems in their life, and more likely to have an early death. Okay, let's look at neuroplasticity. So these are, different pathways in your brain. When you think a certain way, when you act a certain way, over time, repeatedly, those neural pathways become the easiest thing to follow. So if you have, certain things that you always say or certain ways you always do things, it's going to be easier to just keep doing that because it's literally like walking down a path in the forest. The more you walk there, the more clear that path becomes, and it's easier to take that path. So when you're looking at a child's development, if they're in a situation where it's safe and they feel loved, then they're going to be exploring and playing, and those neural pathways for connection and play and cooperation are going to be the ones that are being used and strengthened. If a child is in a frightened and unwanted situation, then the brain specializes in managing those feelings of fear and abandonment. Okay. There's also a lot of physical effects of trauma. Some of these we already discussed. If you can see this slide, what I want to say about this is that when a person is traumatized, they kind of store that trauma in their body in a way. And the one picture on the bottom here is a guy who's in the fetal position. So that's really a position of protection. And these are extremes, Most people who are traumatized aren't laying around in the fetal position, but they may want to be. And so their body, it can really hang on to so many things, and it creates so many problems like, heart disease and cancers, and all these things are very much related to stress. And then you see, on the other hand, we have a dancer with her arms up, open stance. It's a completely different feeling when you put your body in this position. With the neurofeedback loop, like when your body is open, you're sending messages that it's safe. So your brain is saying, oh, we're safe, and then your body says, oh, we're safe, and they can do that together. And it's like, that's the loop. If you're traumatized and you have, carrying fears around, not trusting, not feeling safe, you're much less likely to have these kind of open postures. And so one of the things that they're starting to do now with people who are severely traumatized, like so much so that they can't even talk about it, they will try to introduce some yoga or some dance or even theater to get that person just moving in a different way than they're used to. And that can actually change the neural pathways in the brain just by moving the body differently. And trauma and traumatic, like post-traumatic stress disorder, these disorders actually can go away if you get some treatment. There's several different, empirically proven methods to treat trauma that can significantly decrease the symptoms and kind of just, people can actually make that progress and move forward and gain strength from it, even years later, if they can get some good treatment and they can really heal from this sort of thing. Of course, there's a lot of barriers to seeking treatment. Many people never get help. But if they do, most find that they gain some more sense of control in their life over their symptoms and their way of thinking and being in the world. Okay, how are we doing for time? We might go a little over, but we're getting there. Okay, so cultivating compassion. Here's some attitudes. We already talked about a couple of these that foster compassion, the whole person perspective, the patient perspective, seeing others as part and parcel of Krishna, and being deeply loved by Krishna and cared for, seeing Krishna in the heart of every living entity, and knowing that Krishna doesn't want to see his devotees troubled. He actually takes pain, when he sees that his devotees are in distress. He doesn't like that. And then also knowing that we're interconnected and we're wired for attunement. There's a nice quote from Beyond Illusion and Doubt. When you love God, you love everyone and everything. Some practices that foster compassion: attuning, actively listening. So this is like, engaging, eye contact, leaning forward, really hearing, reflect back what you hear from another person, serving other people, spend time with people whose life experiences are different from your own. Give words to experiences and feelings. I'll try to explain this one a little bit. So like if somebody's going through a difficult time, sometimes they don't know how to talk about it. They may not even, depending on, if they're used to processing or talking, they may not even know something's wrong with them. Just being able to give some words to the situation, like, I'm struggling, I'm not doing well, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, I don't like that this happened. That can actually get a person kind of unstuck just by giving some recognition. Also giving others Krishna, most compassionate. Okay, some barriers to compassion. So when somebody needs compassion, it's usually because they're suffering, they're hurting. I mean, everybody needs compassion all the time, but usually when we see an opportunity to practice this, it's because we see somebody hurting. And sometimes what can happen is that pain in someone else reminds you of your own pain. So you don't want to deal with it. If we're not used to dealing with even our own difficult emotions, why would we want to try to tackle someone else's? Here's a quote by Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist monk. She says, when we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience the fear of our pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently towards what scares us. Also from the same author, she says, in cultivating compassion, we draw from the wholeness of our experiences, our suffering, our empathy, as well as our cruelty and terror. It has to be this way. compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness can we be present with the darkness of others. That's kind of deep. But you can see how that would be difficult, you know. You've got your own things to deal with. And when you see it in somebody else, it reminds you of your own. So it's easiest, in some ways, just to not even go there. Also, barriers to compassion, setting good boundaries. A lot of people are not very good at setting boundaries with people. But you have to. For a healthy relationship, there has to be some boundaries. You can't allow people to walk all over you or to hurt you or to undermine you. It's difficult to accept people when they're hurting us or taking advantage of us. Having good boundaries is a way to hold people accountable for their behavior. So it's not that we just love and accept and cherish everybody just because they're here. I mean, maybe if we were, you know, completely elevated in transcendence and we could actually see everybody as equal, as part and parcel of Krishna. But honestly, I think most of us are not there yet. So where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So when somebody's, you know, doing things that are hurtful or that are, you don't have to put up with that. Like, you don't have to keep those relationships around if the person is not willing to change, if they're not willing to, you know, be more loving and compassionate themselves. You don't have to expose yourself to people that are toxic. That's having good boundaries. Shame is another pretty big barrier to compassion. So this is kind of the similar thing, like we don't want to get involved with people and how they're suffering because it might remind us of our own. But also shame keeps people from talking and from connecting. And the idea is that you feel like if somebody really knows me, really knows, you know, how I am and who I am, they won't love me, they won't care for me, they won't want to be a part of my life. So we have to really get, you know, under this idea of shame, and we have to expose it. What keeps it alive is not talking about it. So here's another Brené Brown quote. She did a lot of research in writing about shame. She says, "Shame derives its power from being unspeakable. If we cultivate enough awareness about shame to name it and speak to it, we've basically cut it off at the knees. Language and story bring light to shame and destroy it." So what I think of here is like, you know, there's a lot of devotees who are struggling with some things, maybe feeling like they're not making the mark, for instance, but there's hardly any room within our culture, within our society, to share that with another person. And so they keep it to themselves. And, you know, most people are probably struggling with a lot of the same things, but that fear of judgment and rejection keeps a person quiet. And so that grows in them and can grow and grow. It can be really detrimental to the person's feeling of self-worth and effectiveness in the world, and it just in their own life in general. So if you can develop a trusting relationship with another person where you feel safe to talk about, you know, your shortcomings, your downfalls, and your struggles, it can be immensely helpful just to share that with another person. And odds are that person is going to relate with you, or at least accept that about you and say, that's okay. None of us are doing it perfectly. Okay. So Krishna consciousness as the solution to all this suffering. So what Prabhupada has given us is pretty amazing. He's given us everything, really. So since we're running out of time, I'm going to kind of go a little bit faster. But basically, just by this knowledge and information that we have about devotional service, learning how to love God, learning how to love each other, new ways of living our life so that, you know, we're not out looking for how can I please myself, how can I get things for myself. These principles, spiritual principles, are so powerful and so potent that really they have the power to give us the peace that we need in life and to elevate us to the platform where we don't have to come back here and experience this anymore. It helps if you are of sound mind and you have some peace. It helps to have that, to be able to practice Krishna consciousness effectively. But the two of them together, like, having good supports and having a healthy state of mind plus spiritual practice, it's like super powerful. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1-2. I'll just read these really standout kind of points within this. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within the heart. So pretty powerful what Prabhupada has given us. When you consider what makes up ISKCON, who are the people, who are the devotees here, many people have been through suffering. They've come to a place of dissatisfaction with the material world and distress, and that's why they have come to Krishna consciousness. Also, many people that were born into the movement have been through significant trauma. We know that trauma affects whole families and systems. It's not just the one person. And it can also become generational, meaning the beliefs and behaviors of those who have been traumatized are adopted by the children. I could go really far into that, but I'm not going to. Just know that it does get passed down, like these, feelings of mistrust and danger in the world that can be passed on. So Prabhupada has given us a way to live and serve together in community and in harmony with nature and Krishna's will. He also gave us the ability to be realistic about this. As devotees, we know we can't expect utopia here in the material world. We understand the need for austerity, sacrifice, and tolerance. There's going to be struggle. It's not going to be easy. It's still the material world. And like we discussed before, we can understand as devotees that whatever suffering and troubles we come across is Krishna's mercy, Krishna's blessing. Okay, within ISKCON, so many different kinds of people, so many different backgrounds. We're all individuals. We are doing it a little bit differently. We all have a different relationship with Krishna. We understand things differently. We see things differently. The main thing is that we've all come together with the understanding that we are spiritual beings meant to be serving. And we're trying to make progress along this path. We're all at a different place along the path. We're all struggling with something, at least to some degree. And I would argue that that can be a really positive thing. None of us are doing it perfectly. And each of us has general and specific needs, personal, social, emotional, etc. And while these needs are, many of them related to the ego or to the body, they're still needs. These need to be addressed. And so you have to see where a person is at and kind of meet them on the road there. This is a very nice verse. Most people know this. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and to the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. So the first line of this is in the association of pure devotees. We need devotees. We need each other. Creating a supportive environment within ISKCON. And is this going on way too long? I have about maybe 10 slides left. Should I look at this? Okay, I'm just going to keep... Hello?
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and finish up?
Okay. So looking at, where did this go? Cultivating, where did it go? Sorry. That took more time than anything. Where did it go? Okay. Sorry. Okay, so to create a strong society, healthy society, we have to have, I don't know why I just changed this view or how, but anyway, I'll just continue for here. We have to have healthy and strong individuals. And so you have to take care of yourself. You have to learn how to nourish and nurture yourself to be able to be strong and healthy, to help other people, and to be an effective servant. So some principles of self-care. Sorry, this is not full screen anymore. I don't really know how to get back to it. Anyways, maintain a lifestyle that supports your sadhana and relationships that support your sadhana. Seek out mentors whose qualities you would like to have. Vaisheshika Prabhu, one of my heroes, he says, collect mentors. Like, you can have enough. If there's people that are inspiring to you, have qualities that you would like to have, you know, maintain those relationships, seek that out. Balance different aspects of your life: spiritual, family, work, hobbies, recreation. Gratitude practice. So this Brene Brown, you know, she was doing this work with different aspects of social work. She did some research, and she was looking at the relationship between joy and gratitude. And what she found was that 100% of the people who said that they felt joy on a regular basis have a daily gratitude practice. So this can go a really long way, gratitude. And a daily practice can be as easy as writing down what you're grateful for every day. Also maintain some interests. We do need some level of sense gratification, depending on, you know, our level of advancement. We still need to have some fun. Allow for some creative time, unstructured time, and dovetail your activities. You know, everything can be related to Krishna. But your brain and your body need that time to decompress and de-stress, and it's through play is a really good way to do it. And continue to have short and long-term goals. Always be working towards something. Forgiveness, that can be really powerful. So if you're a type to hold a grudge or hold on to things, that can be really toxic to your own everything, to your own physical body, to your emotional sense, and being able to let go of that stuff, forgive yourself and forgive other people, can really help kind of unclog some of that, you know, the mess that's there in our minds and in our hearts, and help you move forward. And making a sincere effort at problem solving and conflict resolution, like if you have conflict with people, try not to let that fester. Don't let it drag on. Try to resolve that. Don't leave things undone within yourself or with others, because these are the things that bind us here to the material world, and they actually have the power to bring us back. Imagine you hold a grudge your whole life, and at the end of life you're thinking about this person probably coming back. So if you need to get professional help, it can be very effective. Healthy relationships. We discussed the importance of having that supportive community. So nourishing the relationships that provide us with that, you know, sustenance in our life. And Nectar of Instruction gives us these 6 types of loving exchanges we know. Also make the relationship an offering. Keep Krishna in the center. Strive to behave like a sadhu. Mostly demonstrating compassion, like that's the foremost quality of a devotee. Choose compatible association that helps you grow. Healthy relationships include feelings of safety, trust, stability, intimacy, closeness, being able to be real with somebody and to feel understood and feel felt by another person. Another thing you can do to help yourself out is to get some mercy. Here's a nice quote from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 14. 16. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's special mission is the deliverance of all fallen souls in Kali Yuga. Devotees of Krishna must persistently seek the favor and mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to become fit to return home back to Godhead. Some bad habits of the mind. So we talked about these kind of neural pathways. Once you get set in your ways, you can kind of get stuck in different negative ways of thinking, like fault-finding, catastrophizing. Here's a whole other huge list of thinking errors that people can get into. Kind of leaves you scratching your head when you see somebody doing this. But these are, we probably do some of this stuff. But recognizing it can help you change it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, so we know that the neural pathways can be changed. There are certain practices that can help you regulate your body, regulate your mind, actually, and so especially like mindfulness and meditation, where you can access deep states of peace, healing, gratitude, openness, acceptance, and joyfulness. The more you practice these, being in these states, the easier it is to kind of tap into that. And so if you have a practice of tapping into that resource and it's easy for you, like when you feel stress coming on, or you can just feel your mind starting to go in the wrong direction, you can bring yourself back. You can center yourself and tap into these states of peace and healing. And we know that, the power of, chanting Hare Krishna, having this most amazing mantra, if we combine this, like if we actually use our japa time to find that center, find the peace and the awareness, tapping into the healing and the gratitude, focusing on the holy name, like putting all of that together can be so amazing, so healing. Motivation for change. If you don't, like if you have stress in your life and no healthy way to outlet that, this toxic stress hormone, cortisol, in high levels can be extremely detrimental. Impacts memory, immune system functioning, bone density, can increase weight gain, blood pressure, cholesterol. It also adds to increase for risk for depression, mental illness, and lower life expectancy. So those are some good reasons to find some de-stress ways. Okay, this is almost done. Elements of a supportive environment. So we're looking here, overall what's a supportive environment, but we can definitely apply this to ISKCON. So it's physically safe, where it's free from physical dangers, including people who are known to be a threat. Emotional safety, you feel like you're able to be vulnerable with trusted peers and mentors. A place where there's clearly defined values and mores within the society. Communication about what's expected and what's not. What's accepted and what's not. And accountability when things go wrong. So these, clearly defined values, these are just like boundaries, like safe boundaries, like you would put in place for a child, But even as adults, we need these. We need to know what's expected of us, what we can expect of others. And then if something goes terribly wrong, like you have to acknowledge that and make it right. Also, having a mood of non-judgment. Sorry, I didn't look up the specific reference for this, but this was a Prabhupada quote that I saw, saying that these principles, these regular principles, are for you to follow, for each of us, not for us to judge or impose on other people. We're not to do any judging of others, really. And if you can love and support a person, and they're chanting Hare Krishna, they're doing devotional service, naturally they're going to grow. The purity and the force of the mantra and service will naturally cultivate within the person. And so these other unwanted, anarthas are going to disappear naturally. And then also, Prabhupada said that you will show your love for me by how you cooperate with each other. Okay, this is basically the final slide. So on the left side here, we have kind of what the behavioral health field says. These are protective factors for stability and overall mental health and wellness. And then on the right side, we have what ISKCON provides or promotes. So one of the things, like we said, is the presence of a supportive environment. We have access to that. Belief in a higher purpose. We understand that we're servants, we are part and parcel of Krishna, and the material world is not our home. Healing of the heart and purification or peace of mind. We can find that through Shastra, Japa, Kirtan, Seva, so many ways these spiritual practices can give us this healing and peace of mind. The importance of having a cohesive narrative, making sense of life and suffering. Shastra gives us that explanation. Why are we here? What are we doing here? Like, who am I? Why am I suffering? And what can we do about it? And then also learning new behaviors, new ways of living and being, and creating new neural pathways. So in devotional service, we have a whole new way of doing everything, basically. I would bet that most people who came to Krishna consciousness, after their 20s or so, had some set behaviors and thoughts and ways that they did things that are completely changed now after coming to Krishna consciousness and learning to use our bodies and our minds in different ways, like dancing for Krishna and putting your arms up in surrender. Okay, as if we didn't have enough already to talk about. These are just some questions I thought would be good. Looking at the future of ISKCON, we don't have to get into all this stuff, but basically, like, who are the new people joining, and how are they being incorporated into the society? And how are the senior devotees preserving and promoting what's most important? And do we have a clear way forward? I think we should. And we can consciously create the environment that we would like to have in line with Srila Prabhupada's vision. Okay, that's all.
Okay, so I'm going to mute everybody.
Sorry for going so long over.
A lot. I had no idea you were going to try and cover all of that in one session. I mean, wow, that was a real marathon.
I think it was just an intro to the 10-part seminar, and it was great. Now we know what we're looking ahead of us. So thank you so much, Tulasi.
Thank you.
I have about 20 questions, but this may go on until noon if we do that. Who else would like to make a comment or question?
I think we should try this in parts.
Okay. There's definitely enough there. Yeah.
Maybe she could have one day a week for a while.
Okay, so it was interesting enough to hear some more, but too much information at once.
Can I ask this? When you were, I'm not going to get all the terminology right, but I believe it was called Attunement. And then you went over a little bit about how just by other people being able to express themselves about some sort of a traumatic experience, that in itself is healing. But then you also mentioned about how you have to have barriers. So this is the real trick, because there are many devotees that have been traumatized in different ways, and they want to express it, but what comes out of them is like so polluting that you feel you just don't want to be around them. Every time they see you, they want to dump on you, all the faults that they're finding in others. But you can see they really have that need to for someone else to hear them out. So,
yes.
Any recommendations?
Well, it is important to have the boundaries. So if you're the type that can hear somebody else's trauma or hear somebody else's trouble and it doesn't affect you, like you're able to be supportive and helpful, then you can do that. But if you know you're the type that's going to internalize and take on somebody else's problems and be negatively affected by that, you shouldn't put yourself in a position to support that person. They really need to find somebody who is equipped to provide that support, and it may have to be a professional. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. I don't know how many devotees are in that position of like being a counselor. You know, it's there's a lot of devotees with some serious problems that are looking for help, but very few that can deal with it.
If I can
by the way, somebody's making noise and I can't tell who it is. Sorry.
It doesn't show on yours.
No, it's not strong enough to show. So if you're not speaking, be sure to mute yourself.
Could I add my 2 cents about this?
Please.
Isn't it that if we in position, that's right, if we are professionals, if we can counsel people, and, you know, but other ways in Shastra is very clearly said, you know, we should not put any criticism on another Vaishnavas, because the only thing that's going to happen is that poison, that toxic thing going to come into our heads. And sadly enough, that sometimes if devotees didn't came from the, they didn't get rid of that kind of rasa, kind of enjoyment of seeing, you know, if they have kind of enjoyment, you know, of seeing faults in others. That's actually very sad. So I don't know if we all can listen out of compassion. That's my conclusion.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like you're saying, some people might get some sort of pleasure out of hearing another person is struggling because it might make them feel like, oh, I'm doing better than that person at least. But that's not the type of person that, you know, should be sought out as a sounding board to really go to somebody and say, can I help you? Can I hear you? You have to be able to do that, you know, with an open heart. You kind of got to check yourself and see, what are my motivations here? Am I doing this to really help a person? And you're right, not everybody has the capacity to be in that sort of a position. To some degree, we should, and we can work on that, you know, increasing that capacity to care for someone else and to tolerate their distress. But that has to do with your own health and well-being, you know.
Yes, and I do understand if something happens that actually really the situation calls for help, that's one thing. But if somebody just, if you ask the person, so what you gonna do about it, you know, that we have to change, we have to forgive. And many times, if this thing's going on and on for years, people don't want even to hear about it, you know. So it can be that situation also. Then the person not interested in forgiving or not interested to changing his heart.
So they're just talking about it?
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on without, you know, changing. So that's a different situation. I think it's two different situations we're talking about.
Yeah, I think in that case, the person probably does need professional help. If there's obviously something wrong and it's keeping them from moving forward, but they're not really ready or willing or knowledgeable about how to move forward from there. People do want to do better and feel better, you know, but a lot of times they just don't know how to do that.
I see some comments there. Maybe some other people want to talk with Dr. Prabhupada.
I'm sorry if I...
We don't have enough time really to do this justice. We don't have the time. It's over, way, way over. So, to be fair, we should deal with this in parts. It's a good presentation, and there's a lot to talk about, but there's no time. So, and so I'm traumatized.
I could give you some pro bono counseling.
No, there's a lot of good points in your presentation. It just has to be broken down into 3 sections or something.
Okay.
And you might try, I don't know if you can organize it like this, but on the mundane or the academic side of psychology. I mean, it's obvious we're all messed up by our childhood, babyhood, whatever, and we are engaging in a process that's ultimately meant to heal all that. But there's certain principles that aren't being followed by the devotees in general, such as Turnata Pisunichena or compassion. I don't think compassion is all about equals. There's compassion is when somebody has some position over others, they have to exhibit that. That has to, if they're not, maybe they shouldn't be in that position. But there's a lot to talk about. And it's just, then the process of Krishna consciousness, that's a whole section. And then the practical application to what's going on today and the dysfunctionality of the ISKCON family.
I see. Yeah, you're right. There's a ton to cover.
And I don't know if you need to be a professional to deal with some of this. I think that there's principles that we've been given. They just have to be followed, and there has to be accountability when they're not followed.
Right. And for a healthy person, you can say, here's the standard, here's how to follow it, and they can do it. But if a person themselves just literally doesn't have the capacity, to empathize with others or to put themselves in another situation, they just may not be able to do that.
Right. I understand. There are people that are crazy. People that were crazy that were attracted to Christian consciousness because it's exotic. And some of those people are online railing against devotees, thinking it's their duty to do that, to be angry, and it's their service to blaspheme other devotees, which is ignoring the first offense against chanting the holy name. So,
right, and you're
so
right about we have the process, we have the means to purify all of this, to work all of this out of ourselves. And if we adopt that and we really apply that, chanting sincerely every day, following the principles, then we don't need all this. You don't need to go see a therapist. You don't need to, practice yoga or mindfulness. But since we're not really there, it's good to use everything available.
Philosophically, we're not on the same page. Some people are acting like they're liberated when they're not. They're dealing in the lower modes. There's a dishonesty that pervades the society, and it needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say about, people acting a certain way, acting like you've got it all together, acting like you're doing it all perfectly, when, we're not. None of us are doing it perfectly.
Correct.
But we should be, normalizing that and finding common ground with that. That's how we can come together and look realistically about where are we actually and how do we move forward from here.
Right. Yeah, I think what you have is valuable. It just needs to be broken up into parts.
I agree.
I really like how you connected the academic, practical aspects to Krishna consciousness. That was really very good.
Thank you.
If I could just ask a question, if it can be quickly answered. One thing that really intrigued me was about, I believe you called it the whole person perspective.
Yes.
That this person's coming from all kinds of experiences, and it may not be you that's setting it off. He or she has a whole history, and even may go back generations. So my question to you is, that sounds really useful, but how would you know what the other person? All you know is you're getting barraged by some real negativity, and it'd be great to see this person's whole person perspective, but you don't know their history. You don't know. All you know is why.
Yeah, so if they're really coming at you and you are honestly bewildered, like where is this coming from, you can probably assume that it's coming from their end, that you haven't done anything to bring that upon yourself. But you're probably never going to know the person's whole story. I mean, even people that we really know well, we don't know everything about them. We don't know everything about the way that they see things and the way they think and feel. So, you know, people are multifaceted. They're weird in a lot of ways. They're confusing. So we'll never really figure it all out. I mean, the only thing that you have is the way that you respond. How do you react to that? Are you going to react in a healthy way, or are you going to, you know, internalize it and let that bring you down? Are you going to try to help that person? You know, are you going to nod and smile, walk away? I don't know. Is that helpful at all? I mean, it's hard to know.
Oh, that's good. I like how you said it's how you react. It's not that you're necessarily going to know what it is that's setting this person off. But yeah, it was good you said that you shouldn't take it personally. I like that point that you made, which is not easy to do.
Right.
I really liked that point about neuroplasticity, and then you had this point going through the whole seminar, the whole lecture, and because it's such an important thing to know for us, because that's why actually it's very good that you're coming from the professional background. So many things can be also explained, and we can, we can be more optimistic about our practice, because just by knowing that our neuropaths can be changed, and that's what's happening with our practice, devotional service and chanting, our neuropaths are changing.
Yes.
And anyway, and another thing is just I wanted to add a little thing you probably know about this mirror, scientists found this mirror neurons, that how it works, and it's some of the advanced devotees in our movement actually looking into this very seriously, because our practice calls for, just by watching, we're explaining that later we can talk about this, but just by watching advanced devotees, we can actually getting some of the qualities just by watching them and observing them.
So powerful, right? We should put ourselves in a position, you know, expose ourselves to these.
Right. That's why hearing is so important for us, constant hearing, chanting.
Nice point.
So, Tulsi, thank you very much for doing this. I think everyone agrees that if you could represent this would be more like an introduction. And then if you could break it up into bite-sized pieces. Personally, I think 3 is not enough. I think it would take quite a few more. But anyway, if you're amenable to this, I think it would be great if you could do like a series on this.
I can work on that. It takes me a while, but...
Well, it looks like you put a lot of work into this. But,
a lot of thought, yeah.
If you'd be into it, to break it up into more bite-sized pieces, then it would be much appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, graphically it was beautiful. Actually, the slides were beautiful.
Thanks.
Very nice. It was a nice presentation. It was just, I think Ramananda's got, it's an overview, but if we could break it up, there's a lot to chew on there. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's actually so much more than I even went into. So yeah, thanks for tolerating my unprofessionalism in that way.
It was great. No,
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All praises to
Hare Krishna.
All praise to the senior devotees and all the assembled Vaishnavas. This is my first time online.
This is my friend Achyuta. She's here in the Boise area. Haribol.
Thank you for inviting me to participate. I just want to, not just because you're my friend, but also just acknowledge you for all the time and effort that you put into this presentation. It's a topic that's desperately needed on a personal level for many individuals, and I believe in our ISKCON society, it is a topic that is not addressed enough, and that we need to continue to have open dialogue and discussion and support around. So thank you so much for your service, Tulsi.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mataji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tulsi, very much.
Haribol.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, Haribol.
Okay,
Hari Bo. Hare Krishna.